Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Hawken, the founder of Chop Local. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at choplocaluniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Meat Success Podcast. I'm Katie Olthoff, the co-founder of Chop Local and Chop Local University. And I'm joined here with somebody that's local to me, but we are recording from our respective computers about 20 minutes apart, I think. We are joined today with the Story City Locker, which, like I said, is one of our local lockers. So Ty Gustafson is the owner, and he and his wife, Bobbie. And Ty, I'm excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always good to take the chance to speak about what we do. It's fun when someone takes an interest in what you do.
Yeah, so you and I met in person just recently, but we kind of worked in the same circles since Chop Local started because you've done the processing for a lot of our farmers and vendors on Chop Local over the years. But before that, let's go back even further. Tell us about the Story City Locker, how you guys got started, and kind of that origin story there.
Sure. So Bobbie and I opened Story City Locker in October of 2013. Before that, both Bobbie and I had corporate jobs, and we were really in a point in our lives where we had middle school age daughters, and my job was requiring a lot of travel and things like that out of the country, and really wanted to be home more, find something more local. I grew up as a farm kid, but, you know, as a lot of people know, you just can't jump into farming. That you need a path into that as well. But we had family friends of ours that we've known for, well, ever since I was a kid that had a locker. And I'd been around it, had experienced working with them. We would deer hunt and process our deer there. And part of the room and board for going deer hunting near their locker was you had to help process deer in the evenings after you get done hunting. So a lot of exposure there. And it was probably 2012 or maybe late 2011 when we decided to kind of venture down the path, and people got real excited, and there hadn't been a new locker in a lot of years prior to that. And, you know, everybody was like, well, when are you going to open? And we didn't even have a piece of real estate yet. So we had to do a lot of discovery. We had a lot of people that helped us along the way, learn what we needed to do and how to start a business like this and all the regulations and things like that around it. So that's one of the things we say a lot is we had a lot of people help us get started, and we definitely pay it forward. I can't even tell you how many people around the country that I've been in contact with that want to start a small locker, and I've sent them our business plan and our layout of our facility and things like that. So that way they had something to start with, because we had a lot of people that assisted us to get going, because it's not like we were in the business or had family that was in the business directly that could help us do that. So.
Well, I love that you're paying it forward, and this podcast is just another way to do that, because now you can come in and say, we've been doing it. You know, we started this journey 14, almost 15 years ago, and we've learned some things along the way. So hopefully that's what you'll be able to share. So did you guys live in this area? How did you choose the location?
We did. So both Bobbie and I went to Iowa State University and then settled around Ames area. And our girls went to school at Roland Story in Story City, Iowa here. So we had lived here, and it just so happened that it was a good location for a small processor because there was kind of a void in the area. We're right on the interstate, so it's a close run for a lot of our farmers that sell at Des Moines or Ankeny Farmers Market. So that was a good connection as well. So, and the two things when you start a small processing that you need to be aware of that people aren't typically is municipalities sometimes don't like lockers in their towns. So checking with them and making sure they're good with that from just the aspect of harvesting animals, and then also whether or not the municipality can handle the water usage that you do. Because on average process about 20 beef a week. When I talk about it, I talk about it in the frame of beef because it's the largest animal. So 20 beef a week, and that's a lot of water, not only consumption, but also wastewater. So there's a lot of towns that can't handle that if it's a smaller town. So we were lucky that our town here was supportive and it was kind of a good fit and we didn't have to move.
Yeah. So when you were first starting to plan, you said make a business plan, where you were going to build, things like that. The last few years, we've seen a lot of grants and things like that since COVID. Were there those types of resources at that time for you, or did you start up from scratch, bootstrap it, or, how did you do that?
Yeah, there was no interest in that. And honestly, a short story on that is we had a very supportive local bank here that thought it was a great idea. And the SBA office, the Small Business Administration office they worked with, was down in Des Moines. And me and the vice president of the bank went down there one day for a meeting, and the person in the metropolitan Des Moines area could not understand why you would want to open a locker and did not think it would be successful. And me and the vice president drove home, I think it was in 2011, from Des Moines, and we're just like, felt like we got hit by a bus because we were like, this seemed like a no-brainer.
But shout out to our rural banks because, my husband and I built a large farm in 2007, 2008, and had to go, and we worked through a local bank that had, we were young. We were 24, 25 years old. We had no equity, and they worked to make it happen for us, and they've been awesome partners since. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then our local bank, they contacted around and they said, well, have you contacted the Siouxland office out of Sioux City of the SBA? And we were like, well, no, because, aren't they all the same? We contacted them on a Thursday, emailed them the business plan and all the information, and had approval on Friday. So it was a lot different experience.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe it was just the person. Maybe they just had more experience. And for those who, just a little context for those listening, the Siouxland office, Northwest Iowa, has the highest concentration of livestock in the country, except for the major feed yards that are in Kansas, Texas, those types of areas. It is huge livestock country. So yeah, maybe they did understand it a little bit better, but
yeah, so through the SBA connection and utilizing the Small Business Administration, we did get a no-interest loan through the USDA for some equipment. But really, that was it when we got started. We liquidated our retirement accounts and all those things for getting it started. And basically, we're all in at that point. So
honestly, did you have any idea how much work it was going to be? Or did you kind of have some rose-colored glasses that you were looking through? Because I know we had rose-colored glasses when we built our farm, or at least I did.
Well, yeah, because you always think, well, we work hard, we can do this, and we can do it all ourselves. And that's, especially a business like this, there's a lot of moving parts, and you can't do it all yourself. We have 9 employees now, including Bobbie and I. So, our team is very valuable to us and to getting those things done. That was probably, for us, the rose color, because, we had somebody that was in the business and we knew the work and what you needed to kind of get through in volume to be able to make payroll and things like that. But the other stuff, and even the SBA and things, we didn't know QuickBooks and we didn't know payroll and all these things and how to do that. And that's usually when we give people advice, regardless of what type of business they're starting, is to get a grasp of that and understand it immediately, because it will save you a lot of stress.
For people listening who've listened to these episodes before, you may have heard the episode I did with my business partner, Jared, or you hear me reference him. You rarely see him on the podcast because I'm the one that likes to talk to people, but he's the one with that business background. And you're right. Like, there's no way that I could run Chop Local and Chop Local University without him. He has an ag business degree and has worked in a variety of businesses, and that's so valuable. So I like that advice. Find somebody like that. If you don't have somebody like that on your team, find an advisor.
And that's the partnership that Bobbie and I have, in the business part of it, is she has learned and understood all of those parts and pieces and takes care of that. And I do the operational things and we make it happen as a team. So
perfect. So when you opened up, was it immediately the farmers were just knocking on the door to make appointments and bring their animals in?
Well, we were lucky enough that we made a lot of noise before we opened. We did a lot of marketing and trying to find our customer base and things. And And we opened in October, which is good for a meat processor because that's the busy season. But then, March comes around and you're trying to figure out what you can do to keep things flowing. In the first decade of us being open, when it comes to meat processing, we tried everything. I mean, we tried doing distribution of value-added products. We had a delivery van. We were working with restaurants and groceries trying to process and deliver local meats. We had a pretty good sized retail space and things like that, along with the custom processing and the inspected processing. So, we tried a little bit of everything just to see what would stick and what was valuable to us and what would make us a success. And a lot of those things have gone away. We can say we've tried them, and just geographically where we're at and what the market demand has dictated what we are doing.
So at this point, you're not doing retail, you're not doing the restaurant sale. I mean, give us a rundown of what you narrowed it down to that has been your best niche, knowing that that may not be the same for every locker that's out there listening, but it has been for you.
Yeah, so I really view being a small meat processor a lot like being a small farmer. All of us farmers are different. They all do different things based off either what they enjoy, what their geographic area will allow, how they can be successful. So it's the same thing in the meat processing area because we learned quickly that the need was in harvest, and at least in our geographic area. Harvest was where the need was. So direct-to-consumer customers, quarters, halves of beef, half pig, those type of things. And then being, like I mentioned earlier, just up the interstate from Ankeny and Des Moines, the inspected processing for people with named farms that want to do resale. And when we first started, we were state of Iowa inspected. And about, time flies now, but I think it was pre-COVID, about 2021.
If I remember, it was right before COVID. If you're talking about CIS, it was right before COVID. You guys were working on it.
We spearheaded and were the first plant that went CIS in the state of Iowa, which is the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Program, which elevates state inspection to USDA. So that allows, we're in the middle of the state. So really for us, it was about getting it done for the industry for the state of Iowa and also the third parties that we work with that were shipping product around the country. Shipping state inspected product is kind of a gray area. The USDA would say, well, if the transaction occurred in Iowa, if they bought it on the website and it was in Iowa, then you're kind of okay.
Right. But I got to chime in on that gray area is really gray because when we talk about did the transaction happen in Iowa or did it happen somewhere else, when we look at online, I know meat's not taxable, but if you are selling online a taxable item, the tax rate is the buyer's location, not the seller's location. So I always caution people like, hey, it's your risk. You interpret that the way that you and your inspector interpret it, but if you want to be zero risk, you find a USDA or a CIS inspected locker and you get your meat inspected. That is the best, safest, check all the regulatory boxes way to ship your meat. So I just have to throw that in there.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And for the lockers that were doing more retail that were around the border of the state, it was much more valuable for them because, like Council Bluffs couldn't sell anything in Omaha and areas around the Minnesota border, they had grocery stores that wanted their product 10 miles away and they couldn't put it there. Because at the time, the USDA really wasn't interested in inspecting small plants. That's why the CIS program came about and all those good things. So with that, knowing that harvest was what was needed, and then we worked hard to get that CIS program in place and we do a lot of third-party processing, which for us is what we call ourselves a service provider. That's basically a direct to consumer for us as well, because we're not distributing the product, the farmer is. So we'll process it, get it inspected, everything, they take it and then they distribute it by the cut rather than having it, all in one freezer for one family's consumption. So, and it's really changed. We've had quite a few lockers for one reason or another. Like I mentioned, their lockers are like small farmers that have gone USDA inspected. Now the USDA has actually started taking on small plants, which is a surprise to me, and that's great. So there's options out there for, at least in Iowa, for small processors and the area for either to be CIS or USDA, and not just custom exempt or custom only.
Yeah. I can't remember how many states now participate in CIS, but there is such a patchwork of state inspection and custom, not every state has a state inspected program, but a lot of them that do now have that CIS option, which I think seems like it's been kind of a good middle ground. And that may depend again on which state you're located in and how eager your state is to enable that.
So the nice thing about that for the states, it helps keep them viable because their inspectors get more training, and also they get reimbursed from the USDA for any of the CIS plants that they work at. So it helps their budget. So there's a win-win for the state programs as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, where we were talking, you said that you tried a little bit of everything when you started out, and then you've narrowed it down to mostly processing for farmers that are selling direct to consumer. Is that correct?
So right now we have 2 days of inspection with the state, and we'll do 10 beef, we'll do 5 beef a day or what have you. And then we have 3 days of custom processing. So we do a lot of direct to consumer in relation to, again, farmers just selling, and they could be named farms as well, because at that point it's just a custom direct to consumer activity. So Monday and Tuesday and Friday is custom, and then Wednesday and Thursday, all activity that happens on those days is inspected. We have the inspector here, and we work on all of those products and those harvests on those days. We have a retail space. We pared it back to being just products that we make for direct to consumer people. So if somebody's never bought a quarter of beef before or a half a hog and they want to try the sausage, they can come in and buy a pound of it. So that way they know, okay, I'm going to get 20 pounds of that. So I better make sure I like it before I get 20 pounds.
That's so smart. So it's those value added, further processed, your sticks, which are great, your brats, which are some of my favorite, the skinless brats. Everybody should try to get Ty's recipe because I love them. And I will tell you, Ty, honestly, I have never eaten a bratwurst and liked it, like a grocery store brat, not doing it at all. And then I tried beef brats through one of the farmers that we worked with, that we've both worked with, and I love them.
It's been surprising, the beef brat's popularity.
Yeah. As we're recording this, I have 2 beef in the Story City locker hanging, and I think brats are on our list for sure. Just patties because our family loves those. But
so we do have, most of it is value added products, and this is standard locker fare. We've got sticks and jerky, and we have a local farmer that has their eggs in here. But we do have, because in today's marketplace, if someone's interested in direct to consumer, there's an instant gratification piece. So one of the things we do have is in our retail space, we have a half a pig processed ready to go, and we have an eighth of a beef processed ready to go. Again, that's meant for people that want to try it out, kind of like the value added products. So they can kind of see, what do I get, and how is this packaged and all these things, because there's a lot of people that didn't grow up. I was in college before I learned that meat didn't just magically come out of my parents' freezer, right? You had to go buy it. And there's a lot of people that didn't grow up on farms and things like that, but want to do that. This gives them an opportunity to try it and to see what it's about.
I think I had been married for 10 years before we ever had we bought a quarter of beef from one of your farmers. His initials is JR. You can probably figure out who that one is. It was amazing. It was so amazing. And for a young wife, we didn't have a lot of money at the time. We weren't buying steaks at the grocery store. And all of a sudden I got to learn how to cook steak from this Angus calf. That was just amazing. So let's talk about that. And we should have had Bobbie and Sydney on this call, because Bobbie, your wife Bobbie, and Sydney on our team have worked a lot on processes and information to help custom, we'll say, beef and pork customers that are buying a half a beef or buying half a pork, make it easier for them to make those decisions about their cut sheet, especially if they've never done it before. What are some of those things that you guys have put in place that has made that easier over the years?
Yeah, so we have on our website, you can submit your cut instructions, and it's actually a script that it follows you through. And that has evolved over since we've started in the questions that we get asked and the confusion around what is what and where it comes from. So the cut sheets, and we tell people, go out and go through a submission. And if you don't hit submit at the end, we don't even know that you did it, but people can go out and see what it asks you and what it communicates to you as far as, okay, if you get this, that means you don't get this, and how many pounds of this and that actually comes from a quarter of beef on average, or a half a pig on average. So that way people have a better understanding what they're getting into, and it's not this big mystery. Because I think that's a lot of why people don't process that way. It is a lot of money, but if you total up what you spend at the grocery store on that meat over a year's time, it's worth the cost of that freezer to have at home.
Yeah, I had a friend from college who was buying a quarter of beef for the first time in the last couple of years, and she said, they said something about a cut sheet and they gave us this form to fill out, but I have no clue what's going on. And I said, go to the Story City Lockers website and pretend like you're filling it out there, and it's going to walk you through like everything, like you said, the different choices and things like that. So,
Yeah, so that's Bobbie's done a great job in that, and it's very valuable because when we first started, there was a lot of confusion, and then there'd be people that would be frustrated with what they got, and we don't want that. We want people to be happy and satisfied with the product that they take home, because our intent was when the farmer drops it off here, anything that we do from this point when it arrives to when the customer takes it home, we want to improve upon it. So that's where the 2-week dry aging, we want to make sure it's cut exactly as the customer wants. And we want to get those cut sheets in early. So we even offer a discount if people get their cut sheets in before harvest. So that way we get all of our questions answered. And then I guess I don't know the exact numbers, but I know probably over 50% of our customers are repeat customers from direct to consumer. And they just say, I just want it like last time. And we have it on file. We just pull it out and they know exactly what they're going to get because they've figured out exactly what they consume. Because when someone calls and says, well, I'm getting another half a beef from Farmer Joe, but I still have 10 roasts in my freezer. It's like, well, obviously our last cut sheet we did with you wasn't right for how you guys consume your beef. So we don't want to get any roast this time. And, here's some different options that you can do or this and that. So, yeah.
yeah, I know. I think Sydney and Bobbie this spring also worked on an email sequence that would help people understand as well. And even for, new people that have never bought and don't have a connection with a farmer, just a little bit more information about how it all works and maybe helping them connect too. So,
yeah, we play matchmaker a lot for people because they've said, okay, I want to do this, but I don't know any farmers, and we've got farmers that, are on our schedule. We book a year in advance and they may have 10, 12, 14 beef on the schedule. And by the time it comes around to August, someone drops out or moves out of the state or something. So they have a half a beef available. So then we say, okay, we have this person call and this farmer has it. So connect with them and become their customer. And then, we'll take it from there to make sure that it's fulfilled for how they want it done.
I'm guessing that you have, but tell me how you handle, do you ever have farmers that you really don't want to work with again? And so I guess the idea here is, have you fired customers? Because we talk about that a little bit with our farmers, is that if you have a customer that's never satisfied, that always has a problem, it's okay to fire a customer here and there. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, that's very, very true. So our best farmers, and we feel like our farmers and our customers, we're training them all the time, because in order to make it work, we have to do a volume of activity. If someone has 8 beef on the schedule and they only bring in 4, well, that's a problem, because I have a wait list that could have used those spots, and we have equipment and people that could use them. But also just the disorganization. People come in, well, I got buyers, but I can't remember who they were. I'll call you tomorrow, and then they don't call back. And legally, from a custom standpoint, when that beef arrives at the locker, it's legally changed hands to the people that are getting it. So we have to have the names from those people when it's custom processing when the beef arrives. Otherwise, the inspection can say the farmer has to take all that back, and it's his meat now.
Yeah, because you can't resell it if it's been custom. So
well, and also, basically, like I said, ownership has changed hands once the meat or the livestock has arrived at the lockers. So the names of the new owners have to be listed. So, but yeah, we have not had customers come back and things and ask customers not to come back, whether that's a farmer or customer, because every business has that. It's not a good fit. We always tell, farmers, as soon as that livestock is going to make it, whether that calf or whatever, or the pig or the lamb, that's when you need to be selling it. Because the sooner you can sell it, the better. If you bring it in and you're like, well, I've only got 2 of the 3 sold, well, then you're going to be in a rush and you're not going to be able to be successful with the sale of those animals because you may take less, or you may end up taking a bunch home that you didn't want to take home as a farmer because you didn't have them sold in time. And also the customers that you work with that, know what it is they're doing and are happy with the product that you back. The worst thing you can ever hear is the butcher kept a bunch of my meat, which is a common thing.
I was going to ask you how you handle that. Yeah.
Well, we have no interest in any of that. We're a service provider. And it's kind of like, if you think about a mechanic, they're working on cars all day long. The last thing they want to do is work on a car at home. And it's the same thing as a butcher. It's like, we see all this meat, we're working all this stuff. We just want to see it go away because we've got more to do. We actually have it in our employee handbook that if anybody is seen taking any of a customer's meat or anything, it's immediate termination. There's no question, because we don't want to have that even out there as an option. So yeah, those things come up. That's pretty standard. It's frustrating because there's bad examples out there in the meat industry. You see the press all the time, this, that, or the other, whether it's a large processor or a small processor, somebody doing things they shouldn't be doing. We've evolved our customer base to be a really good group of people that we enjoy working with. And quite honestly, how Bobbie and I feel is that our customers are our employees for Bobbie and I, and we take care of them, and we make sure that they don't get abused or frustrated by anybody, and that they're compensated well for what they do. And then their customers are, either the farmer from the backside or the customer coming and getting the meat. So we got to make sure that we have a good team and that they know what they're doing and can handle when some of those things arise. But obviously if something does happen, it gets escalated and we take care of it. But, our team's very important to us. So that's where we always say that from Bobbie and I's perspective, because we do a full benefits and everything. And we actually shut down for 2 weeks a year. So that way everybody can take a week off and recharge, because it's physical work. It's not hard. It is different. Most jobs, regardless of how complicated or hard they look, there's tools out there to make them easy. There's so many butchers from back in the day, their backs are shot because they've been carrying quarters of beef and all these things. And, we've got all the lifting mechanisms and everything, and there's no need to be lifting anything super heavy or anything like that. So we just value our employees so much. They're a big part of our team, and we want to make sure that they're happy, and because we can't do it ourselves. For the demand that we see, we need the full team and operating well. So
For employee wages, you don't have to give a number, but would you say that your employee, and you said you have a full benefits package, which I think is probably unusual, but are they kind of on par? There's some factories in the area. Are they on par with the factories? Are they on par with construction crew wages? I mean, what do you kind of see there?
yeah, Story City has quite a bit of manufacturing here, with some different companies, and we're competitive with those as far as the seniority and things with in those aspects of it. The other part of it is, Bobbie and I both worked in the corporate world for ever since we were out of college, and there's a lot of good examples and a lot of bad examples of leadership and the importance of life-work balance. So not only benefits, but scheduling and time off and those type of things. We know how valuable that is, and we work with our entire team. Everybody has, there's some younger people that, are newly married. There's some people with children. There's some people that their kids are out of the house, and everybody has something different going on. And we work with everybody individually to make sure that they're working to live and not living to work. And that's how Bobbie and I want to operate as well, because we didn't get into this business to work even harder and not have something in retirement. We want to enjoy ourselves as the journey goes on.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about seasonality. You mentioned that fall, especially when you first started, maybe fall is really good. Deer hunting in Iowa, November, December, January probably kept you really busy. You get into March and things got really a lot slower. So how have you adapted to that over the past few years?
Well, so, we built our facility new in 2013. And, even if you build something to last, when it gets utilized a lot, it wears. And we keep a running list of things that during our down season, so we save up for our slow season. And during that time, then we utilize our employees and everything to do maintenance and to repair and fix things. So that way everybody kind of has a hand in on what's going on, and we have the bandwidth during that time to do it. Because, there it is seasonality. Not many farmers have livestock that are market ready coming out of winter. It's possible, but it's not as easy as, spring calving and fall harvesting. So we get a lot of new customers that come to us, and we've got a full second half of the year. And I tell them, I said, if you can have your animals ready in the first part of the year, you're going to be able to go to whatever locker you want to go to. If you want to fall calf and that way you're spring harvesting, or same thing with your pigs, if you have something on your farm to where you can, finish them out and through the winter, that's going to be optimal for being able to utilize like I said, about whatever processor you want, because that's a slow season for everyone.
What I'm hearing is you've almost kind of embraced that. You know that it's going to be a slow season. You plan your cash flow. You get ready for that from a financial standpoint, and then you embrace that time to do maintenance. It's similar to our farmers who do a lot of their paperwork and book work in the winters when they're not outside nearly as much. So it's just, you're not trying to fight against it, I guess, is what I feel like. You're just using it as a way to make your business work because you need to do that maintenance.
Right. Because there can be panic there where you're like, oh, we've got to keep everybody busy, and we've got to, buy a bunch and do a bunch of retail stuff or do something in order to keep that going. And then you're just borrowing more money. And really the challenge is to work smarter and not harder in relation to a seasonality type work. And we do process deer trim. We have a problem here in central Iowa is where we have no outlet for any deer bones because of CWD and those type of things. So that we don't do as many when we first started, before all that came about, where rendering wasn't taking deer bones and things like that, we did a lot of deer, and that helped us get through winter. But that's not how we can operate here now. So we found other ways and evolved into where, like I mentioned, so one of the weeks we take off is either towards the end of February or March, first part of March. So that way everybody can have some time off and maybe go someplace warm, because that's the worst part of winter right there.
And when you take a week off, you close down the whole thing. Everybody takes a week off, right?
Yeah, we make everybody take the week off. We shut down. We notify all of our customers, everything. And then we do the same thing the week of July 4th. Because it's summer, everybody enjoys having, that summer week off. So, like I said, we put a sign out, we close up.
Yeah. I like that idea. And then I'm assuming, just based on what we've talked about, that your employees can also take time off during other times if they have a family thing.
Absolutely. And really, it's the big benefit for Bobbie and I is because as business owners, things happen when you're not there. So those 2 weeks allow us to not have to worry and just be on vacation as well.
Yeah, you guys can just relax too that way. That makes sense. Let's talk about ebbs and flows. Pre-COVID, now, since COVID, kind of that sort of thing.
Yeah, so COVID came about and it got crazy. We did the CIS thing, kind of building upon that, so that way we would have some other things we could do with our business. And then COVID hit, and everybody thought that the grocery stores were going to be empty, and farmers were bringing everything they had in, and it was crazy for a couple of years. That certainly came back to pre-COVID, where there's a slow season again and all that good stuff.
Did you end up expanding your team or anything like that during the pandemic?
We did some productivity improvements. So we added a secondary hoist in our harvest area. So that way we could move things through a little bit faster, as well as had a backup because we had a single point of failure. When we first opened, honestly, we couldn't afford the new equipment, the processing equipment. So we had used equipment. And when that came about, we upgraded some equipment so that way we didn't have to have so many concerns about things breaking down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's just no time for a breakdown. So things are kind of back to pre-COVID, but still strong. I feel like anecdotally, and I haven't counted or anything, like looked at the Iowa Department of Ag's website or anything. It feels like there are more lockers in our area or in Iowa now than there were pre-COVID. It feels like there's been that increase, along with, like we kind of mentioned earlier, all the grant funding and things like that. Has that impacted your business at all, or you haven't seen that really?
Well, I haven't looked at the numbers either, but I would venture to guess that it's probably not increased that much. there's been a lot of older lockers and things in smaller towns that have been around forever that they weren't able to find buyers for, or what have you, and they just closed, which is unfortunate, but in the IMPA, we actually had a session, the Iowa Meat Processors Association, we had a session a few years back about putting lipstick on the pig to make your business worth buying. And there's a lot of, places that were just duct taping things together and, keeping things running and not putting the profit back into the facility to make it worth selling or for someone to want to buy it. When we started in the Iowa Meat Processors Association 13 years ago, we were the youngest people there and we were in our 40s, and that's changed a lot with the grants and with those things. There's a lot of younger people getting involved, starting some new facilities, which is absolutely fantastic. But the older ones are going away. And some of the what happened with that grant money was it was available for your facility to upgrade or to do some things, but you had to go inspected or CIS in order to actually get the money. So, back prior to when we had the locker, we're talking back probably in the 90s or maybe late 80s, the HACCP plans came out and you had to do all these things. And a lot of these old lockers were grandfathered in to where they didn't have cooler separation from cooked to raw product and some of these other things. And they never changed and they were still operating that way. And the good thing that came out of the grants and some of those funding opportunities was inspection was able to help eliminate some of those problems. And again, some of the other places that just didn't upgrade their facilities to be able to be current regulations, and they couldn't find anybody to buy them and they're not around anymore. So I think we gained a bunch and we lost a few, but I think we probably are up a little bit, but not back to where it was one in every county or anything like that.
Right. So you guys are processing, you've talked about beef and hogs, and I should know this, but do you do goats? Do you do lamb? Do you do poultry?
So like I mentioned, we've tried everything. So when we first opened, our first summer of 2014, we processed chickens. We did that and learned a lot because the regulations are completely different for non-hooped species. And we had to do all of them inspected, which increased our cost and things like that. And pretty much our team said if we did that again next summer, that they would all leave. So
they were out, huh? Hey, but Iowa's got a new, maybe it's not new, maybe it's new owners, but I need to get caught up on this. But there's somebody that's doing USDA inspected chicken cuts in the state now. That's kind of exciting. So
yeah. And they've been working really hard. It's a nonprofit. They're up by Osage, Iowa. I can't remember their name right now, but we've had some contact with them. They've been really great to talk to, and they really understand the need that's there. We focus mostly on our existing customer base, and if one of our farmers says, "Hey, my kids had some sheep at the fair, can I bring them in?" And we'll do that. The challenge is that if we market that we do lamb and goat, without a doubt, within about a week, we'll get a call that somebody needs 100 lambs processed. And the smaller the livestock, the more labor is required. So we do a few here and there, but we certainly don't strive to do a whole bunch, because if you think about, if we can do 4 beef in our harvest area in a day, we would have to do like 40 lambs to have the same amount of revenue because of the per pound and the per head and the harvest and all these things. So it's a lot harder when it's a smaller livestock. There's places that specialize in that, and they didn't spend all the equipment on the large hoists and the infrastructure because they can just do smaller livestock. And that's great. That's their business plan. But yeah, we're licensed to do the standard hooved species. But I would say 90% of what we do is beef and 10% is pork. We used to do a lot of pork for farmers locally that had confinements that they would have some one-off pigs, whether it's a rupture or something like that, and they would keep it for themselves or their employees or whatever, and they would bring them in. And when you're handling one at a time, there's nothing wrong with the livestock. It's just that you can't send them through a factory-type processing facility. But most of the big growers and things don't allow them to keep any of those anymore. So we see a lot less pork from that aspect of it. And pork's really cheap in the stores right now, so there's not a lot of people that are raising it to sell, which is unfortunate because the quality difference is definitely there.
Oh man, you led me into my next question. Okay, that was perfect. Perfect segue. I was going to ask, and I will say that we love all meat, right? Okay, so, and there are people who want really lean pork, and there are people who want lean beef. But what do you see? Let's talk about pork first. What do you see that makes for, I guess, what would you consider better meat quality, and what makes for that better meat quality? Is it breed? Is it feed? Is it living conditions? I mean, is it maybe it's a combination of all of the above, is what I'm guessing, but.
Yeah, I think so. For the pork that we see, the free range, and the Berkshires and the Iowa Herefords and the different pigs that do well outdoors, the quality of that meat is really, really great. And I grew up, we raised pigs growing up as a kid, and we ate a lot of pork, and it's a lot different than what you get in the store. And that's just part of the buying local and buying direct, is that, you not only know who you're buying it from, but you know how they raised them, what they fed them, and why they did it. I mentioned that what we do is trying to improve upon it when it gets here. We utilize all the data from Temple Grandin on our holding pens, so that way the livestock, regardless of what it is calm. There's no adrenaline. How we do the takedown, the dry aging, and how we cut everything and then flash freeze it. It's all meant to improve upon the quality of it from when it arrives here, and not go the other direction. So that holds true for pork or beef or lamb, the whole thing. So.
Yeah, how about beef production practices or breeds? And maybe that one is more, it's a little bit harder to say that there's a difference, everybody wants something different. So,
Yeah, I know. I grew up on the farm, Northwest Iowa, and I thought I knew livestock, and not until we had a locker did I know livestock, because there are so many heritage breeds of pork and the different breeds of beef and how people feed them differently, and what they want to do with them. It has a lot to do with genetics. It has a lot to do with how they feed them, the feeding regimen, and all of that. The one thing, with grass-fed beef that we always recommend to people is, if you want grass-fed beef, that's great, but we're going to strongly recommend that when you get that cut, that you do not do any bone-in steaks, because what people do is you get out this beautiful T-bone or porterhouse or even a bone-in ribeye, and it's grass-fed, so it's going to be leaner, and they put it on the grill, and they're cooking the steak, and there's still a little blood on the bone, so they keep cooking it.
and then they overcook it.
Well, they've overcooked the meat. They cooked the bone appropriately, but they've overcooked the meat. So we say, you want New York strips, you want boneless ribeyes, you don't want any porterhouses, you want your tenderloin fillets, so that way you don't overcook, because there's not as much fat and as much moisture in there that's going to protect that meat from overcooking. And that's our best recommendation on grass-fed.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Because grass-fed beef are typically older as well. It takes longer to finish a grass-fed beef. So they're into the 24 months instead of 18 months. So what happens there as well is that bone is harder. And so, we know it when we're cutting them, that, the saw really makes a loud noise when you're cutting grass-fed beef. So even with that, then when you're cooking it on a grill aspect, it just takes longer to make sure that everything around the bone is cooked, because that bone is harder. When it comes to the roast and everything, sure, leave the bone in all you want, because you're going to braise that or slow cook it, and that'll be just fine.
Super interesting. I've also heard I've had discussions with a farmer that's worked with you that has a Simmental influence in their cattle, because they get a really great yield, which for them, from a business standpoint, means that if they are paying you a harvest fee, a kill fee basically is what it is, right? That kill fee is spread across a lot more pounds when they have that bigger animal, versus my mini Herefords that my husband brought in, where if we were trying to make money off of them, that would not have made quite as much sense, right? So.
No, yeah, Simmentals have a much bigger muscle base and will have a higher yield. But really what impacts that is the feeding regimen, and if they're overfinished versus underfinished, because, they can bring a Simmental in that's been overfed, and the yield will be lower because, it'll have an inch of back fat on it like it was a pig versus what it should be as a beef. So, yeah, it's really the smaller farmers and them knowing their breed and their genetics and how they feed them and what works for them. We work with some name like Bigelow Farms. He's very much into how how he feeds them, and he knows his herd and what they need to finish without over finishing or him losing money on them as well. Same thing with Carney Family Farms and some of the others that we work with. They all know their herds because they've had those genetics for maybe a couple of generations of farming.
Yeah. And that's a learning curve that for people starting out selling direct to consumer or, newer to their even just establishing a herd and getting to know those genetics. They don't always know that right away. And I think, like you said, some people do want the grass fed, but there's different things that you might do in processing to make it, as you said, improve upon it as much as possible. We talk about meat quality, and that's really important in direct to consumer, but those business decisions like yield, or is it a docile mama cow that you have with this breed, that, those things make a difference too, right? So.
Right. And the third party customer is what I tell them, because even harder is trying to sell it by the individual cuts and to those type of things. And I tell them that their profit is in the odd bits. There's people out there looking for oxtails and hearts and livers and suet. And, that's been a huge thing lately. And don't just throw that stuff away. That market is there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about tallow and yeah.
Yeah. Lard, there's people cooking a lot with lard on the pork. And, those are all things that I tell them. It's like, the bones, there's so many people that are looking for bones, whether that's for pets or for soups or whatever. I mean,
you do the marrow bones, the canoed, is that what they're called?
Yep, canoed marrow bones. A lot of people, want those for for doing marrow butter and different things. But yeah, that's why I tell them the profit is in the odd bits, because if they can break even with all the regular cuts and not throw away those other pieces, because you're paying to have them processed, whether they are a ribeye or not, that there's profit in those pieces.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we see with online sales for those farmers is that we have a couple customers that will order from a different farm every time, but when a farm puts oxtail in stock and they have 10 in stock, this customer will buy all 10 at once. You know what I mean? And we also have people call in all the time that are like, I want does anybody just throw away their bones that they would just want to give to my dogs, And we're like, no, you can buy them on the website. That's what it's there for. That's what the price is. Nobody's throwing those away anymore. So.
No, and the one thing that we do with our excess bones, if there are some that aren't utilized, is we have a partnership with the Blank Park Zoo, and they pick up once a month. We'll just keep the ones that aren't utilized, sometimes rib bones and some of those things. And they use them for the predator birds and the lions and tigers. So they love having them down there, and we're happy to work with them on having that in their repertoire for feeding them.
That's really cool. I don't know that I've heard that before. Do other small processors do that with zoos, or is that?
I don't know. If they don't, they should, because rendering is expensive, and this will help cut down on the rendering and everything. We've tried to find different avenues for things like that to help offset that bill, because behind our electric bill, that's the next highest bill we have is the rendering. So, we've looked at incineration and composting and all those things, but logistics around that is really difficult as well. So other, inventive ways to make that happen is great. So yeah, the zoo has been a great partner for us on that.
Very interesting. Man, that's a great tidbit. I feel like there's been a lot of things that I hope listeners can take away from this, from everything. One of the big takeaways that I have when I've talked to you and Bobbie is about how you have niched down and figured out over the years into what works for you and what you're not interested in diluting your resources or your labor to do too many other things, which I think is really smart. We talked about your employees, how you treat them, what that looks like, which I think I've seen led to a pretty stable employee base for you, which is something we hear from processors, that they have a hard time finding good help. Doesn't necessarily seem like you guys have that problem, right? So.
Well, that's geographically a challenge too. A lot of these processors are in rural areas where there isn't many opportunity or the population that exists either. So, yeah.
True, definitely. We talked about when you were getting started up, your location it worked out well for you, that it happened to be a good location where you were already living. But like you said, right off the interstate, centrally located for a lot of farmers, and not that far from those farmers that are selling at the bigger farmers markets in our state. We've talked about what makes a good farmer for you, which is, if I can summarize that, I heard really good communication. They brought in the cattle or animals that they said they were going to bring in, so they're not doing a no-show. They've got them pre-sold like they're supposed to, and they've got that list of the customers ready to go for you, getting you all the information on time.
In the locker world, we always joke about how farmers are challenged in counting. They'll book 8 and bring 6, or they'll book 4 and bring 8, and it's for one reason or another, but it's just kind of our inside joke. It's like, well, that's farmer math, I guess, on what they're bringing in or what have you. And that's where communication and over communication and organization and like selling that livestock before, when it's viable, and the customer base that communicates as well that they're selling their livestock to.
We didn't talk about this, but do you charge a deposit fee, like or an appointment fee for those farmers?
We don't. Like I said, our customer base has been with us for year after year after year. They know what to expect from us, and we know what to expect from them. We've had a couple of custom lockers in the area close in the last year. So we've had some new ones that new customers come in that we've had to train, because they aren't familiar with how we operate, and they were familiar more with how the other processors operated, which might have worked for them, but doesn't work for us when we're trying to optimize throughput. So
Yeah, good. Well, this has been a really great discussion, Ty. I'm sure that there were a lot more takeaways that I didn't just touch on here, but I really appreciate your time. Looking forward to getting our beef out of the locker for the first time. This is the first time we've taken it to Story City. So, big pressure, because you want those mini Herefords that, we've got 5 mamas. So, we're going to be a huge customer for you going forward, I'm sure.
We see a lot more of the minis, whether that's Herefords or Aberdeens or things like that, because, people understand that, you don't need a steak as big as your face. A smaller steak from the smaller breeds is much more popular.
I've got 2 teenage boys. I need the steak. I keep telling my husband that we need to get some bottle calves that are not mini, because I want to feed out a full-size steer again, because we've got 2 teenage boys. But where we're located, pasture land is just at a premium. We have 2 acres fenced in, and it's all corn ground, and we wanted cattle for our kids. I'm sorry to our listeners who have heard this before, but we wanted cattle for our kids, and the minis work really well on our 2 acres instead. So, yeah.
Yeah, the ground's too good around here to not have corn or beans on it, unfortunately. So,
but I still get to look at cows out my window, and I still get to have at least mini steaks in my freezer from them. So, yeah. All right. Well, everybody, if you are looking for more information, we talked about the website, and Ty mentioned at the top of the episode that he is happy to give out advice or share his business plan. So you can find their website by looking up Story City Locker. So thank you again, Ty.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to choplocaluniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.